Lamar Jackson at this point has kind of transcended that elite tier of quarterback in my mind. He is, in my opinion, the best dual threat quarterback of all time, more so than Cam Newton, than Michael Vick. He just plays the game in a different way. Like, we often see college athletes dominating at the college level because they're just a better athlete than everyone else. Lamar Jackson looks like that in the NFL. Like, we have NFL level athletes that can't lay a finger on this guy.
It's not like he played badly. You know, I'm sure people would love to get the numbers that he had last year, this year, you know, on the offense. It wasn't his play that killed the Jets. It was the moves made to please him over the 2 years that really killed the Jets. Like, the Alan Lazard move was terrible.
He's still on the roster.
I know. Yeah, no, I wouldn't count on this offense in the playoffs at all. And again, I think if they get there, I think they can absolutely win the Super Bowl. Because let's not forget that both times they've made the playoffs, they've reached the AFC Championship game.
I mean, he went up to a Browns beat reporter after a preseason game and was like, "Oh, why are you always writing bad things about me?" It's like, you are the quarterback. Like, you can change that yourself. You don't need to go and confront a reporter for kind of doing their job.
Hello, everyone. Cecil Martin here.
Hey, this is Hunter Henry.
What's up, man? This is Max Crosby, part of Raider Nation.
Hey, this is Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman.
Hey, it's Tyler Lockett of the Seattle Seahawks.
Hey, this is Jerry Judy, wide receiver for the Denver Broncos, and you're listening to the 14-Yard NFL Podcast.
We are just a few weeks out from the start of the 2025 NFL season, and with the preseason games underway, we're starting to get our first real look at how these teams are shaping up this year. I'm Sam Moores, and this is the 14 Yards NFL podcast. Welcome back, everyone. And today we're continuing our run through each division ahead of week one. Today it's a turn of the AFC North, a division that always delivers drama, defense, and some of the best rivalries in football. And joining me this week for the first time is Dom Corbett. You may have seen him talking about the NFL on TikTok or YouTube, or heard him talking all things college football alongside our friend of the pod, Ben Isaacs, who was on last week on their College Days podcast. It's great to have you on the show, Dom. You ready to get into the AFC North?
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, of course. I love the AFC North. It's one of my favourite divisions. Hard fought, really strong division. 2 elite quarterbacks, elite defenses. What's not to like?
Exactly, and I mean, certainly you don't know what you're going to see from at least 2 of the teams this year, and then as we saw with some of the teams last year, they will flatter to deceive as well, and anyone can beat anyone in this division on their day, especially when it's cold. So it's certainly an entertaining division. Right, as of the first 2 episodes of the series, we'll start the podcast by looking back at last year before deep diving into the 4 teams in division and predicting their win total for the season. It was the Ravens who were victorious last year, winning their second straight division title by going 12-5, which saw the team end up with the AFC's number 3 seed. Lamar Jackson had another top year, coming close to a second MVP award in a row, but he was beat by Josh Allen. And Derrick Henry proved to be a really smart addition for the Ravens too. Heading into the playoffs last year, I actually thought they were probably the best team in the AFC. But they were eliminated in the division round for the 3rd time since 2019 after losing 27-25 in heartbreaking fashion to the Bills. In second were the Pittsburgh Steelers, who continued their streak without a losing season to 21 years, when many expected them to have a down year last year. Mike Tomlin's side started hot out of the gate, sitting 10-3 in week 14, but lost their final 4 games as their offense stuttered down the stretch, losing the division to the Ravens and not scoring above 17 points in those final 4 games. Now Pittsburgh did make it to the playoffs as the 6th seed, but their wait for a playoff win extended to 8 years, going 0-6 in the postseason since losing the AFC Championship game in January 2017. This time last year, the Bengals were the talk of the league as Joe Burrow was getting healthy again after missing the end of the previous season with a wrist injury, whilst Jamar Chase and T. Higgins were demanding big contracts this time last year. I had them winning this division going into the season in our prediction podcast last year, but after seeing their defense get run over by New England in week 1, I realised how wrong I was. And despite Burrow having one of his best seasons ever since coming into the league in 2020, and Chase and Higgins also balling last year, they're 1-4 to start the year and 4-8 going into December. Eventually it did click, winning 5 games in a row to finish the season, but it was too late, finishing the season 9-8. And there was also some optimism about Cleveland a year ago as well, after an 11-6 season in 2023, where they surprisingly posted the most wins against teams with winning records. That was, of course, this season where they made the wildcard round with comeback player of the year Joe Flacco at quarterback after Deshaun Watson went down. But like Cincinnati, they started out badly, going 1-5 before Watson got hurt in week 7 and finished the season 3-14. And while the AFC North doesn't quite look as competitive in terms of four teams going for it as it did last year, it still looks very very tasty, because Baltimore look as good as they did a year ago. The Steelers on paper should have a better offense after adding Aaron Rodgers, DK Metcalf, and Johnny Smith, and also the Bengals should be challenging AFC heavyweights again, and of course there is all the chaos in Cleveland as well. What surprised you most about how last season unfolded in this division, and what are you expecting this year?
It's a good question. I mean, I think that the Browns imploding was both kind of inevitable and yet still really hard to watch, as is always the case with the Browns. I got a Baker Mayfield poster behind me. I was a big Baker Mayfield guy. It's what got me into the NFL, so I was always really closely tied to the Browns. Ever since they got rid of him, it's just been a downward spiral for them. Obviously, Deshaun Watson was a disaster, and I think that probably ended quite... How can I put this? It was a fitting end, I think, to the Deshaun Watson catastrophe. Him being injured, playing terribly, and being casted off from the Browns in the whole $100 million, whatever the hell they paid him. Bengals, again, it's a classic with the Bengals as well, isn't it? It's Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins doing all they can to make up for a bad defense and a bad offensive line. The Steelers, again, kind of predictable. Made the playoffs, yes, but were aggressively mid in said playoffs. And the Ravens, it's a shame. I mean, I really want Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, but obviously if we're talking about the AFC North specifically here, I want Lamar Jackson to have a ring. He deserves it. I want him to play in a Super Bowl. I want to see a quarterback like that play at that level. And so it was heartbreaking, the Mark Andrews drop, but that's kind of the sport. And so ultimately, I think the AFC North is kind of poised again to give us lots of the same storylines, but also, as is always the case with a division like this, some new and exciting ones.
Yes, absolutely. We'll start our individual breakdowns with the Ravens now, as we have done with every podcast of this series, starting with the reigning division champions and going in the order they were in last year. They are looking to win their third straight division title and their 7th playoff berth in 8 years since drafting Lamar Jackson in 2018. Now, in our power rankings episode last month, they came in at number 3, so just behind the Eagles and the Chiefs, and even then it was very, very close combined between the Ravens and the Chiefs, and it's hardly a surprise why, because this team is very talented. What do you make of their roster?
It's, in my opinion, it's top 2 in the NFL, I would say. I'd put the Ravens ahead of the Chiefs right now for what it's worth. I think their defense is better. I think their offensive line is better. They got Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes, he's elite. But I think that Lamar Jackson at this point has kind of transcended that elite tier of quarterback in my mind. He is, in my opinion, the best dual threat quarterback of all time, more so than Cam Newton, than Michael Vick. He just plays the game in a different way. Like, we often see college athletes dominating at the college level because they're just a better athlete than everyone else. Lamar Jackson looks like that in the NFL. Like, we have NFL level athletes that can't lay a finger on this guy. And it just means that they can't rush the passer effectively because, God forbid, Lamar Jackson finds an escape hatch from the quarterback and takes a chunk out of your offense for 40 yards. Means he gets more time in the pocket. His wide receivers and tight ends get more time to separate, and his running backs in the ground, they have to, if it's a read option where Lamar Jackson has the risk of holding it for himself, and they got to defend against Derrick Henry. It's basically like pick your poison. Do you want to get run over by the hammer in Derrick Henry, or do you want to get kind of cut up by the scalpel in Lamar Jackson? And they got the defense to match. They got a great defensive line. I love their defensive system that they run, that kind of Michigan-esque system. It's what's kind of taking the league by storm at the moment. It's in LA. It's in Seattle. They're just a fantastic team. And it really is a case of, for the Ravens this year, I think, can the variance not bite them, basically? Can they not have the Mark Andrews drop, which cost them their season? And if you replay that play 100 times, they win that game 99 times out of 100. Obviously, yeah, it can go either way. That's kind of the nature of sport in general. But the Ravens didn't lose because someone was better than them. The Ravens lost because they made a mistake. And I just think that this is going to be the year, I reckon.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you. I mean, that, I mean, yeah, that defense is brilliant, and there are you mentioned earlier, you mentioned Seattle. There are other teams like Miami and Tennessee that also have coordinators from those sort of hardball systems as well, and it is really fascinating to see how that system, especially with likes of three safeties being used, has transformed the league defensively. I think for me that is a great strength. Obviously, we'll get into their defense a little bit. We'll carry on with their offense here because I think it is their greatest strength. Obviously, that Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry backfield, you're just talking about it there. That was pretty much everything that we hoped for heading into last season. Ended last season as the number 1 total offense and number 3 in scoring as well. But obviously, as you mentioned, they exited the playoffs at the divisional round once again, and that sets up an interesting year this year, because this year is pretty much the last year where they can have this top roster and have Lamar Jackson on a big contract, because they're set to lose about 30 players this year. 30 players on the final year of their contract. We'll see how many they retain, and then Lamar's cap hit for next year and 2027 is $74.5 million. So this year, as you mentioned, may be their best chance to win a Super Bowl with Lamar Jackson, who, in my opinion, has been the best quarterback in football the last two seasons. I think he should have won MVP last year as well as the year before. I think I know what you're going to answer this, but if this team was in the NFC, do you think they might have a title by now, or at least have reached a Super Bowl game?
Yeah, I reckon so. It's funny how when you stack up the teams in the AFC and the NFC, I just did a video myself about like what team's going to make or miss the playoffs. And the AFC is a rat race. It is a case of you lose one game to the wrong opponent, you're out. It's almost a bit like college in that sense. You almost can't afford to drop the games. In the NFC, you can make the playoffs with 9 wins, depending on what division you're in. The NFC South, winner of that could definitely have 9 wins this year, and they're in the playoffs, and they'll have the 4th seed after all. So I think if the Ravens are in the NFC, yeah, 100%. It's between them and the Eagles. And only last year the Eagles looked like completely invincible, basically, in how they played and how dominant they were. Year before that, I think the Ravens would have had them.
I think there've probably been 3 Ravens teams that I think were seriously capable of doing it. Obviously, the first year in 2019, Lamar's first full year, that was the year he burst onto the scene, won MVP. But then in that season, they were out with their first opportunity in the playoffs after they were shocked by the Titans in the divisional round I think it was the 1 seed, yeah. And the Titans, who were the lower seed in the AFC at that point as well. And then 2023, last year, obviously Lamar won his second MVP. They also had the 1 seed again. There was their first home AFC Championship game in team history that year as well. But then a costly interception against the Chiefs right at the end in that championship game saw them hold on to win 17-10. And then obviously last year, there were 2 scores down at half-time against the Bills, but they had a tremendous second half. He came back, did everything right. And then, 2 2-point conversions that went wrong. The first one didn't, they were stuffed. And then the second one that Mark Andrews dropped right at the end, that would have tied the game and taken it to overtime. That was costly in the end. And, so do you think it's do you think they've been unlucky, the fact they've played the Chiefs and they've played the Bills and in the playoffs, or do you think it's do you think it might be a Harbaugh and Lamar thing that they've just not been able to get it right when it matters?
No, I think it's luck. I think every team in the AFC specifically, but really every team apart from the Buccaneers and the Eagles are kicking themselves for having to play at the same era of Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. And it's just one of those things. Only one team can win it. There's 32. You do need a healthy dose of luck whenever you go on a run like that. And I just think the Ravens just haven't had the luck bounce their way, really. What needs to happen in the AFC, and I really hope it happens this year, because I think this actually, I feel like we've been saying this for the last 2 years, but I do think that this year now is the year where the Chiefs are looking the most mortal. I don't like their offensive line. I don't like their weapons. I think there's a lot more holes on that roster than you would expect, considering how often we talk about them. But it is the Mahomes effect. But they need someone just to knock them out. They need someone to take that bullet for the team, basically, knock them out immediately, and then we can have like a normal AFC Championship game between the Bills and the Ravens. Best man wins. Whoever wins that will go on to win the Super Bowl. And in this year, I'd probably pick the Ravens to do that. But I think it is just the case of unlucky. You've got to beat, in my opinion, 1A, 1B, best quarterback of all time with Tom Brady. You've now got Patrick Mahomes. It's the hand you've been dealt.
Yeah, and the Chiefs are so good, or have been, especially last year, have been so good in 1-score games. I I think at one point last year they were 11-0 in one-score games or something crazy like that, and that's and that's what you've got to beat. So I agree with you. I think it is absolutely just the luck they've been dealt. I do think this year could be their year, as you said as well. I think this roster looks better than it did a year ago, and they look to have had a great draft as well too, with a few guys that I expect to have quite a significant role right away. Most notably Malachi Starks and Mike Green, who looked great in preseason the other day. They've had two big losses in Brandon Stevens to the Jets and Patrick McCarry to Jacksonville, but they have replaced both of those guys. Stevens was replaced early in free agency by Chidobe Awuzie before they then added Jair Alexander, and then they also added Malachi Starks as safety behind him in the draft. And then on the offensive line, it looks like Roger Rosengarten, who's a rookie last year, will have a bigger role in this line now. And they also added some depth in Joe Noteboom from the Rams as well. And if I were to pick a weakness in this team, it probably would be one of the lines. But there's a big caveat here, whereas their lines do look like two of the poorest units on the team, but then you look at their lines compared to a lot of units in the league, and it's still above average. And that's the difference there. I just feel like the Ravens are pretty solid everywhere, but I would say just based on injury record and everything, that one of their two lines might be their weakness, I'd say.
Yeah, I don't love their pass catchers though. I'm not going to lie. I would give that as my. I know the system they run doesn't rely on wide receivers, like infamously, but I do think that Zay Flowers, I really like him, but he's a wide receiver 1.5. He's a kind of like off the line Z shifty spark plug kind of receiver. Hopkins, it's post COVID now. He's not going to be anyone that you kind of want to trot out there every Sunday. And Bateman, I mean, we've been waiting for a Bateman breakout since he was drafted in 2021. So for me, I think the wide receiver, if you're in a shootout and you need someone to make you a play and they're bracketing Zay Flowers in the slot, are you relying on Hopkins? Are you relying on Bateman? I don't know. That for me would be my concern about the Ravens, because I think that the scheme protects both the defensive line and the offensive line to a degree. But yeah, that's the wide receivers scare me a bit.
I can see it, and especially going to pass catchers as a whole. Isaiah Likely's hurt to start the year as well. That's not great for them, because that basically means that you've got a bigger role for Mark Andrews as well. So yeah, I agree with you there as well. But yeah, they're just really good, and I think again, if they stay healthy, they'll be there and thereabouts, and it's just who you play in the playoffs and where you play in the playoffs, I think. But I Lamar Jackson in a big game, I absolutely trust him. We saw in the when he won MVP the second time, it was a really close race. There's so many guys that were up there. There was Dak Prescott, there was Brock Purdy up there as well. But it was those games towards the end of the season, like the Niners game on Monday Night Football, where Lamar just took over and had a great game. Those games towards the end of the season where he got the 1 seed for Baltimore, in those games, like, he basically took over himself. And then so in a big game, I don't see that as an issue at all. Okay, let's finish the section of the preview by predicting whether the Ravens are going to go over or under their projected win total. Now, the bookies have their line at 11.5 wins right now, with Baltimore facing the 12th toughest schedule in 2025. Which way are you leaning?
I'll hit the over pretty hard there. I like them as a 12-win team. I think if they get 11 wins, something has gone a little bit wrong somewhere. They've dropped too many games there. I mean, with 11 wins, who knows? They might not even be winning their division, which I think they will do. So I definitely like the over there.
I agree with you. I think 12 wins is about right. Someone to go over as well. I think it is close. This is a tough schedule. Obviously, the division's tough and they will lose some games, but a lot of the hard games against like the non-division teams are at home. And I think that does help that you're playing the better teams at home rather than obviously playing them away. So yeah, I think I'm going to go for the over as well. Okay, we're going to the Steelers now, who are in need of a big year this year, because they've pretty much been stuck in a rut since Ben Roethlisberger retired. Probably even before that as well. Probably since that last playoff win in 2016. They won a game and then lost to the Patriots in the championship game. Since then, they've had a winning record in 7 of 8 seasons, never had a losing record, but they've only won more than 10 games twice, despite having a winning record in 7 of those seasons. And in those seasons, they have reached the playoffs 5 times, being shocked by the Jags in the divisional round of the 2017 season, before losing by 2 scores in the wildcard round in 4 of the last 5 seasons. So they've not even been competitive in the playoffs recently, which is a surprise because of what we know Mike Tomlin as a coach. Yeah, and he's also got a defense that features 4 or 5 former all-play level players. they're always going to be competitive because of everything they've got on that team. But in the last few years, it's become more difficult for them because they just haven't had the offense. Their quarterback situation since Ben retired in 2021 has been among the worst in the league. But somehow they've managed to win so many games with the likes of Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph when he was coming in for Ben, and Justin Fields and Russell Wilson last year at quarterback. And last year they managed to get a pretty dull offense, but it was efficient at times. They managed to get quite a lot out of Justin Fields, then moved to Russell Wilson, and again the offense sort of carried on. But then towards the end of the season, when they played harder opponents, again they couldn't score above 17 points, and they crumbled. So in comes Aaron Rodgers to be the latest Steelers quarterback to try and break that run of 6 straight playoff losses, and that makes the Steelers a pretty fascinating watch this year because there's a lot on the line. Surely this is Pittsburgh's last go at getting production out of an existing quarterback before investing in a rookie. And then for Rodgers, he's openly said that this is his last season as well. So there's a lot on the line here. What do you make of this move?
I think it's just poised for disaster, frankly. I think the Steelers are off-putting the inevitable, it seems. And I have so many questions about the Steelers and their off-season, really. They've obviously got Aaron Rodgers as the quarterback. He was immobile at the best of times. He's now 40 plus and is coming off a torn Achilles. He's quite literally a statue in the pocket. Before he actually had quite a bit of nimbleness about him, right? Like he's not Lamar Jackson, but he can roll out the pocket. He can make a play if needs be. He cannot do that anymore. He cannot do that. I don't like their tackles. I don't like Broderick Jones. I think he's a bust. I think Troy Fautanu, this is basically his rookie year, and rookie tackles often struggle. If you've got 2 bad tackles in front of Aaron Rodgers now, your defense is in trouble. Then you've got the Aaron Rodgers arm issue, right? Which is the fact that we know Aaron Rodgers for being that pinpoint downfield passer, right? He can throw those Hail Marys literally right into the bucket from the 60-yard, from their own 60-yard line. Like, he can do that. Last year, he was below league average in terms of on-target passing rate, which is not what we know Rodgers to be. He missed Garrett Wilson wide open in the end zone against the Seahawks, and the next play he threw a pick six, a thick six to Williams, the defensive lineman who ran it back. Like, that's not the Rodgers that we know. And I worry also that Rodgers is going to clash with Arthur Smith and the coaching staff. These guys are playing for their jobs at this point. Everyone kind of knows the Steelers are on the clock here. If they don't win a playoff game, even that I don't think would be enough, just winning a wild card game. But let's say, they don't. They're cleaning house. That's it. Is Arthur Smith going to pin his potential job security on Aaron Rodgers, who we all know is only there for a year, even by his own admission? They're not going to be willing to build this offense in his style. They're going to build it in their own style to say that, hey, at the end of the year, look, this is my offense. I did my job. It was Aaron Rodgers that was crap. Please don't fire me. And that's going to create some issue. We know what Rodgers is like. He'll be on the Pat McAfee show every Monday saying, oh, yeah, I didn't like the play call or this and that. I don't think that DK Metcalf is a good enough wide receiver. He's a wide receiver 1.5, a bit like Zay Flowers. He is a vertical guy only. And then the receivers after that, Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson, Robert Woods, those guys don't move me. So that's not looking good. And then defensively, I don't know why they paid TJ Watt. I think they should have traded him for picks, which they need now going forward. They're going to be picking in the mid-teens as always. That's not where a quarterback's going to fall to them. And I think he's past it. I think TJ Watt is past it. His pass rush pressure rate was massively down. His pressures were down. He just makes big plays in big moments and has the Watt surname, and everyone thinks he's amazing. But I just think
also the rest of the line. Also, I agree with you there. The rest of the line last year was also amazing.
Cam Hayward 10 sacks.
Great year.
60
Alex
pressures.
Highsmith had a great year. Again, 3 of the 4 people on that defensive line last year had great years, and obviously they're playing off each other then. So
exactly. It's just the case for me. I mean, his pass rush win rate last year was 13.3%. That's 38th. His pass rush win rate on true pass sets, that's pure passing downs. There's no chip help. There's no double. It's just it's obvious passing downs, 3rd and 10. 16%. That was 48th. It's just not there anymore. And I know he won Defensive Player of the Year, rightly so. Yes, he's elite. Sure, he might be a first ballot Hall of Fame. He's not that player anymore. I just think the Steelers are locked into the past to a point where they cannot see the wood for the trees and know that they're destined to be in what is likely going to be like a 5-year rebuild, because they're just going to kind of be in this mid-teens picking point. You can't get the top quarterbacks picking there.
Yeah, I think with going back to what you were saying about Rodgers as well, I think that's an interesting one because, obviously his time with the Jets did not go as planned, and it's not like he played badly. I'm sure Pittsburgh would love to get the numbers that he had last year, this year, for, on the offense. It wasn't his play that killed the Jets. It was the moves made to please him over the 2 years that really, really killed the Jets. Like the Alan Lazard move was terrible. The Devontae
He's still
Adams
on the
move,
roster.
I know, no. The Devontae Adams move was terrible. To be fair, the line actually played well when healthy last year, but and again, it's you spent so much money on injury-prone offensive linemen as well. There's so many things that, and then obviously the firing of Salah, that was 100% a Rodgers thing as well mid-season. So that's why the Jets crumbled. He actually he played decent. He was around the middle of the road of the league, and that's all you need to take us into the playoffs. As long as you play average, as long as you have average quarterback play and some of the pieces that the Steelers have, that's good. It's just the dynamic that would be really fascinating is because Mike Tomlin has done so well at knowing how to judge diva players, right?
Yes.
You talk about the Antonio Brown situation over the years. So many. I mean, George Pickens really recently, which we'll get into in a minute as well. They moved off George Pickens at exactly the right time. How that person handles Rodgers, who is I'll be lying if I said that in the last few years he's not become a diva player himself. How that is, they're going to be must-watch telly because of that, aren't they?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, not only them, but anything that Rodgers says or does, like this guy's been around the league, right? He knows a thing or two about a thing or two. He knows what he's saying. He knows how it's done. He goes on the McAfee show and goes, "Oh, I'm a player just talking my mind." It's like, no, come on, Aaron. Like, you're smart on that. Like, don't pull the wool over our eyes. It doesn't work. I just think like the downward spiral that Rodgers' career has taken. Obviously, look, he's one of the GOATs, right? And he always will be. And it's just a shame to see that the player that he's kind of become or like morphed into kind of takes away from that. And it's a bit of a shame. And I hope maybe they'll be good, the Steelers, this year. Maybe they'll be better than I think. Maybe TJ Watt will have 17 sacks. Maybe Aaron Rodgers will put it all together. Maybe they'll win a playoff game. Hell, maybe they'll win the Super Bowl. But right now, from where I'm stood, I just don't see that being the case.
So they have, as well as the Rodgers move, they have been quite active over the off season as well. They produced two of the biggest trades, well, probably three of the biggest trades you can say of the off season. They've been very active. DK Metcalf coming in from Seattle, then moving George Pickens to Dallas, and then they also swapped former All-Pro safety Minka Fitzpatrick for another former All-Pro defensive back in Jalen Ramsey and Pro Bowl tight end Johnny Smith of the Dolphins as well. What do you make of these moves they've done this offseason?
They don't mean anything. They don't mean anything. They're just sideways moves. Sure, okay, fine. I think that maybe Jalen Ramsey is better than Fitzpatrick. He plays a kind of a position in the slot most often, which is kind of more centered around the ball. And you can see them on the screen. The safeties are kind of the running backs of the defense in the sense that like you don't necessarily need them to be that great. And obviously you want your kind of your nickels and your corners to be. But he's no spring chicken. Johnny Smith at tight end. Okay, fine. He had one good year for Miami, but before then he was
what I would say is his best years were with Arthur Smith. Best year in Tennessee, best year in Atlanta. So that's why they've gone and got him. But that's an Arthur Smith pick, not a Rodgers pick. So that's your first interesting domino there.
True. Well, very true. But I just think, and then who was it? DK Metcalf again. Like he's maybe slightly better than George Pickens in my mind, but not much better. So all of these moves are just like you get rid of kind of player A that is 1 and you bring in player B that is like 1.2 kind of in that kind of value. It's like, okay, yeah, sure, you have gotten better technically, but not by any actual like meaningful way. You're better off just either going all in properly, keeping Fitzpatrick, bringing in Jalen Ramsey, keeping George Pickens for one more year, bringing in DK Metcalf, than this kind of half-hearted, oh, look, we're going all in, but also trading away the only players that are actually quite decent. It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, it's sort of addition by subtraction, and I think they have got better. I feel like it's just. I feel like, but they need. This is more aggressive than Pittsburgh have been previously. So I guess this is their version of being aggressive. I do like that most recent trade for both teams, but especially in Pittsburgh case, obviously, you basically added a tight end, and you still have a top secondary, and I think that's in that aspect. This did work. How they use Jalen Ramsey would be interesting to me. I think that's the most interesting thing because obviously they've already got Darius Slay, they've got Joey Porter outside corners, and Ramsey's played outside. He was used everywhere last year in Miami. Pretty much, he was used as a pass rusher. He was used, he was used in the nickel. He was used outside. Outside, he was picked on quite a bit towards the end of the season. Though he got absolutely beaten up by the Jets receivers, actually, which for something that might be a Rodgers thing, which is funny going against him in practice every day now. But last year towards the end of the year, Ramsey regressed a little bit, and a lot of the time people have been saying, maybe he's going to finish his career at safety. Well, this could be a chance to see how they use him, whether they're going to use him in the nickel, where they've got two great safeties as well. So I think they're going to use him in a variety of ways, and I think that's interesting to see how he's used, because in Miami last year he was used really well to start the year, and then towards the end of the year he was quite a weak point on that defense, and that's why he fell out of the coaching staff and everything. So yeah, I'll be fascinated to see how that looks, and on paper and resume, as you sort of mentioned at the start, this should be the best defense in the NFL based on all the names you've got on this team. I don't think it will be the best, because I do think some of these players are past their best. I think Ramsey's past his best. I wouldn't say TJ Watt's fully past his best, but I can see where you're coming from there. But like, the defense as a whole is their biggest strength, but I don't think it'll be as good as people think it will be, if you get me.
No, I think that's a fair assessment. It is really a case of like, okay, are they going to be either slightly better, the same, or slightly worse? I think the range of outcomes for the Steelers is very narrow. Like, probably one of the narrowest.
Like 5 to 15 range on defense, and I think that's good enough to get you in the playoffs.
Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah. That's pretty much it. And I think there are, as for the weaknesses, we talk about strengths. I think there are two for me that are hard to choose from for the biggest weakness. I think the lack of receiver two, as you mentioned, really is big, and maybe Johnny Smith can be that receiver two as he was in Miami last year. He was basically the number one target when Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle both got banged up actually last year. So we'll see how he's used by Arthur Smith, and again, the offensive line, that's a big worry, and everything I'm reading in out of training camp does not sound good whatsoever, which as you mentioned, for an aging quarterback, is not the best thing. Luckily Rodgers can get the ball out quick. He's one of the best in the league at doing that, but still that is a concern.
Yeah, it's the offensive line question marks. I think the interior is all right. Like the center, Zach Fraser is fantastic. He looks like one of the better young centers in the league, but offensive line is a weak link position. You can have 4 All-Pros. If you've got one turnstile, the defense are going to go after that guy. And they potentially have 2. And I actually do like Troy Fautanu's outlook. It's not that I think he's going to be a bad player. I'm just expecting him to fare how the vast majority of rookie offensive linemen fare, which is not that well, because it takes a while for them to adapt to the speed of the league and things like that. So the way I see it, there's at least one in Broderick Jones, probably another one at left or right guard, and then maybe another one at right tackle, and that's a recipe for disaster.
Well, they've lost one of their best linemen in James Daniels as well, who didn't play last year because he did his ACL, but they've certainly lost him as well. So yeah, it is a bit of a concern. Okay, let's go to predict their win total for the season. Similarly to the Ravens, they have the 11th hardest schedule, so just one place harder than the Ravens. Whilst the bookies have their line set at 8.5 wins. I'll let you go first again. Which way are you leaning here at 8.5?
I mean, the bookies know what they're doing with that one. I would take the over, but then I would also bet the under of 10, basically. So I'm banking on them getting 9 wins and no more, is what I would say about the Steelers. Like I said, their range of outcomes for me is 8 or 9 wins. That is it. They're not going to get 4. They're not going to get 12. They're going to get 8 or 9.
Yeah, I'm going to go for the over 2 purely, again, I'm with you. I think they're just destined to have either 9 or 10 wins. I think maybe an extra win than you. But again, I don't think they're going to win the division. I think they're basically destined for a wild card Saturday game, and we'll see what happens there.
And they'll lose.
That's pretty much what it is, and that's what the Steelers have been for, well, the last 6 times they've been in the playoffs, really. So we'll see at least I think a success for them is at least being competitive. Like the fact that they've lost 4 straight games by 2 scores. I think even being competitive in the playoffs will be a next step, and just to show that you've still got it, maybe. But we'll see what happens. But it does feel like it is a big year for them this year, because well, there's going to be a lot of change next year. Anyway, even if it does go well. Right, I'll go on to the Bengals now, who will be hoping to return to the playoffs after a 2-year absence from the postseason. Last season, despite not making the playoffs, they scored a franchise record 472 points, and PFF graded them as the best passing offense, but the defense sucked pretty much, and their situational game management was also very bad. Before that win streak towards the end of the season, Cincinnati were 1-7 in one-score games. It did go to 4-7 in the end, but that is just crazy. And that's with a guy that we all think is really clutch as well in big moments in Joe Burrow. That just shows how bad it was everywhere last season. It was certainly shocking because this offense was flat out boring last year, but in the end, when the defense got better as the season went on, it stopped leaking the yards, it stopped missing tackles as much as it was really at the start of the year. But it was just a little bit too late in the end, and they were peaking. As I mentioned, they won the last 5 games and were really unlucky to miss out on the playoffs last season. Here's a question: had they won that extra game and snuck in, do you think they could have won a playoff game?
Yeah. I think the rest of the playoff teams are very glad that the Bengals didn't make it in. If you're choosing between the Steelers or the Bengals, all 31 teams, barring the Steelers, will choose the Bengals because, to not make it in, that is because they are the harder teams. I think once it gets to the playoffs, where all you got to do, I say all you got to do, obviously, it is a lot more complicated than that. But really, all you have to do is string together 3 good performances, and you're there. You've made it, and then your chance is as good as any. And with a quarterback like Joe Burrow, who's incredibly experienced, incredibly poised, he's basically an offensive coordinator on the field that can also throw the ball. You got as good a chance as any. Problem is with the Bengals, as is kind of always the case, and why they're such a frustrating team, is they just can't get out of their own way. They lost the Patriots in week 1. That loss was bad at the time. It looks even worse now. We know how the season ended and what the Patriots were like. Their first year head coach got fired after a single year. So things are really bad in New England. They still managed to beat the Bengals. The Bengals this year need to not start the season after, say, week 5 with a negative record. They can't be 2-3. They need to be 4-1 if they really want to give themselves the best chance. If they want to get an easier first round opponent in the playoffs, you need to be finishing higher than where they're. You need to win the division ideally, and the Ravens are going to win 12, so you got to win at least 12.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you. I think they probably would have won a playoff game. They would have played Buffalo, I reckon, because they would have got inside of Denver. So maybe, but that game would have come down to the very last game, and anything can happen in the postseason. I think I wouldn't count out this. I wouldn't count out this offense in the playoffs at all. And again, I think if they get there, I think they can absolutely win the Super Bowl. Because let's not forget that both times they have made the playoffs, they've reached the AFC Championship game. So that they've got a 100% record of reaching the championship game with Joe Burrow and with Zach Taylor and with all the weapons and everything. So they'll be hoping this year they'll be able to make it 3 championship game visits from 3 playoff trips. Now there's no way that can happen with the defense from last year. So a few changes have been made. Firstly, long-time DC Lou Anarumo was dismissed at the end of last year. In to replace him is last year's Notre Dame defensive coordinator Al Golden. He's got a lot of pedigree. He was the head coach of the Miami Hurricanes and of Temple in the sort of late noughties, early teens in college, and then he went back to the NFL to coach linebackers in Detroit, and then actually in Cincinnati. Then went to Notre Dame, and now he returned to the Bengals. They also spent their first 2 draft picks on defensive players in Jamal Stewart, who we've spoken about a lot on the podcast in the last couple of weeks. That's all sorted now. And Demetrius Knight, whilst they brought in Tadarius Slayton and Oren Burks in free agency too. What do you think about this unit this year?
With regards to the defense?
Yeah.
I think it's going to be the same, if not maybe even worse. I mean, the Trey Hendrickson deal is trending in the right direction, it seems, but at the time of recording this, that is not done. And yes, the Shamar Stewart issue is over technically, but the ripple effect from that is going to be felt, I think, for the whole of this year. Shamar Stewart, I really into draft. I scout all these guys myself, and Shamar Stewart for me wasn't a first-round player because he had 4 sacks over 2 years. He has the physical pass rushing tools of Tarzan, but has the pass rushing understanding of Jane. He just doesn't know what he's doing out there. He doesn't know how to rush the passes, set up moves, rush the pass with any sort of nuance. And even less, you can't even just run through someone, which he should be able to do with his weight and his athleticism. And they're going to rely on Shamar, it seems, at the moment to be an immediate impact. A team like the Bengals aren't drafting players to develop in 2-3 years. They're ready to compete now. They've got Joe Burrow on a massive contract. They've got Jamar Chase on a massive contract. They've got T. Higgins on a massive contract. They're not a rebuilding team. This team is who they are. Like, I don't see why they drafted a player that is, in the best case, going to take 2-3 years to actually emerge. And if Trey Hendrickson isn't on that defensive line, the Bengals are sunk. They're completely sunk. If they need Shamar Stewart to be a 16 sack, 70 pressure kind of guy to just even keep Joe Burrow in the game, you're done. You're absolutely done. So I think the defense, I love the Bengals. I love Joe Burrow so much. I think he's kind of almost one of like the universally most liked quarterbacks. They can't do it alone. As good as Jamar Chase is, as good as Joe Burrow is, as good as T. Higgins is, they need the defense. They need the whole one side of the ball just to not be awful. And I look at the players and I don't trust they can't. I don't trust they won't be.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, especially like I do think that especially without Hendrickson, but even with, I think that defensive line is still quite a big weakness, because even if he does play, he's still, he's not practiced for the whole camp. So he's, and the Bengals always start slow. Now, I don't think Stewart will start, but I think you're going to have two guys who you're going to rely a lot on that haven't practiced. They're going to be behind, whilst the rest of the team, well, this year they're doing something different. They're playing in preseason, hoping to get a little bit of basically a rocket out their arse, trying to start quickly. We've already seen the ones play in preseason. We've seen Burrow play a series and stuff last week. But this basically for them is they're just trying to stop this rut they have at the start of the season. Do you actually think it will work, or the defensive players holding out doesn't exactly help that, does it?
And yeah, I think the Bengals have two massive issues with the team, which don't necessarily center on the players on the field. First of all, it centers around the amount of money they've now invested in three players at two positions, which, look, I love T. Higgins and Jamar Chase together. Paying them both is terrible team building, I think, in my opinion. Obviously, you pay Burrow. Obviously, you pay Chase. You do not then also need to pay T. Higgins. But then also, it's the ownership. When you can't pay players, and there's this culture whereby the players don't trust the contracts they're given, like Shamar Stewart, right? A rookie holding out for as long as he did. That was unprecedented. Like Trey Hendrickson going to Florida and posting on his story. There's just a culture among the Bengals from the ownership down, whereby like they're always going to try and shortchange their players. I mean, compare it to the Eagles. Look, they're such a good team, obviously because they're talented, but you need to get talent on your team first. You don't just wake up and these players are talented. You need to get them in the draft or in free agency. Who is going to go to Cincinnati if you could go to any other team where they're just going to pay you more money up front? So for me, it seems like the Bengals are trying to win a Super Bowl with one hand tied behind their back. And it's going to all fall on Joe Burrow, who is doing his utmost to be as good as he can. And even then, he's elite. He is as good as he can be. And I think the Bengals hit a massive high end of their variance offensively. So they were one of the best offenses they could possibly have been last year. Definitely down the straight, not at the beginning. And they still only won 9 games. It's not enough. It's not enough. I'm really worried about the Bengals if they can't fix the defense and if the offensive line is bad.
Yeah, I think the offensive line. I agree with you. I think the offensive line is a concern. But last year they weren't that bad. Obviously they have lost players, but I feel like the defense is more of a concern. Obviously, you want Burrow to stay healthy, and obviously he has. 2 years ago, season-ending injury. He's missed a year for it. He has had injuries, and that's the biggest thing. But I feel like the way they played last year, I don't think the offensive line is going to be a huge concern. But I do agree with you there. I agree. I think the defense is the biggest concern. Just what happens with it, and obviously new coaching, new scheme, hoping everything can sort of change there. For me, tackling they just couldn't tackle last year. They missed so many tackles last year. I think that's the main thing. So, but that's something that's coaching rather than players specific. And hopefully that's something they can change. And with this offense, they're always going to be there or thereabouts. It's just whether they can, the rest of the team can play well enough to support that and get them into the playoffs where they're going to be dangerous, whatever happens. And I think Yeah, I do think it's an organisation thing because ownership they're known to be it's pretty much the stingiest team in the league. This whole Hendrickson thing is the fact that he's now 30 years old and he as a 30-year-old player he wants multiple years guaranteed to know that he because most organizations won't complete a contract, right? And the Bengals are only offering him 1 year guaranteed money, so basically saying we'll give you this and we're probably going to get rid of you next year because you're going to be 31, and that's where the whole thing happens. And what happens there will be fascinating because I think people forget that Henderson is 30 years old at that aspect. But I think that eventually will get done. But the rest of this, the rest of this team, it's just whether they can keep above that line, isn't it? And it is going to be really interesting to see what happens there because I do think they are a little bit behind the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Bills, but they're probably ahead of every other team in the AFC on their day. It is just whether that is going to happen, and that sets us up well for predicting their wins. Their line is at 9.5 wins, which whilst they face the 13th hardest schedule, so again pretty much the same teams as the Ravens and the Steelers. Assuming Burrow stays healthy, I think this team gets minimum 10 wins, so I'm going to go for the over. I've just got my fingers crossed because again I really like him. I think most people really like him, as you were saying earlier, in the Athletics quarterback tiers ranking they did recently. The execs in the league ranked him pretty much on par with Patrick Mahomes. That shows how loved he is around the league. So fingers crossed everything goes well because I really want to see this team in the playoffs because they are fun. Just a little bit worried about their defense, a little bit worried about the offensive line, but I feel like if they start well, even with those issues, they'll get there and they might even win a playoff game. So I'm going to go for the over.
There's so much to be worried about. Like you said, just the defense and the offensive line, right? Just basically like the most important unit offensively, barring quarterback, and then entirely half of the ball.
Yeah.
But we still think I'm with you. I think they're going to get 10 wins, and that shows the talent of Joe Burrow. That even with genuinely like almost everything against him, they don't even have good running backs. They got Chase Brown. They don't even have a Saquon Barkley. So it really is just those three guys carrying this team as far as they can carry it. And I trust Joe Burrow to get 10 wins. That's how good I think he is.
Well, I think good players like that will mask issues, and we saw that with the Chiefs last year. Like the offensive line was an issue for the Chiefs the whole year. It was only the Eagles in the Super Bowl that could really take advantage of that because they have great players on that defense, and that issue was there all year. I think the Bengals as well. If these good players can mask the issues for long enough, I do feel like they will certainly hit the over there. Okay, let's finish the podcast off with the Browns, who probably the most. Yeah, probably are the most interesting team heading into 2025 for two reasons. The first is, of course, the quarterback situation, which we'll get into a little bit in a minute. And obviously the second is the future of their head coach and general manager. Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry are going into their 6th season in those roles of the Browns. And also some big ups and massive downs. They're firmly on the hot seat heading into 2025. Now, this is weird because obviously Stefanski led the team to their first winning season in 13 years in 2020, which saw him win Coach of the Year. And that was the year they beat the Steelers in the playoffs with Baker Mayfield. But he actually missed that game because he was coming out of COVID, but they won the game for him. And then he coached against the Chiefs in the division round the next week. Now in 2021,
it was the Chad Henne 3rd and 51 conversion. It's like, I wanted to die, but keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, great. That was a crazy game. One of those playoff games you just can always remember because of the chaos that happened in it. The next year they were in and around the playoff mix for most of the season as well, but they fell short at the end after Baker Mayfield got a banged up shoulder that was affecting his play for most of the season. And then towards the end he was sat for surgery. In the off season he got that shoulder surgery, and whilst rehabbing he found out that Andrew Berry had traded for Deshaun Watson. And bear in mind that was a man who was in the middle of a very public battle involving several lawsuits. They gave him a fully guaranteed contract, and that the repercussions since have been crazy across the league. Obviously, Mayfield was traded to Carolina in 2022. Didn't work out for him there. Had one game with the Rams, and then he's since blossomed with the Bucks after they moved on from, after Tom Brady retired. Whilst Watson has started just 19 games with Cleveland. He's had 3 season-ending injuries, and he has only thrown for 19 touchdowns in 19 games. And now, 3 years later, they are in this mess. Do you think these two come as a package based on everything that's happened, or do you think Berry is more at risk because of the job that Stefanski's done to get teams to the playoffs twice? Because let's not forget the Joe Flacco year 2 years ago.
I think almost a bit like the Bengals as well. The Browns have a real ownership and culture issue. I think that, look at the Lions, right? Before, when I started getting into the league and I was looking at all the analytics, I think all that stuff's important, right? I think everything's important. Like watching tape, analytics, your eyes, everything. When I first started, I was like, oh, people always say these boring cliches about, team vision and chemistry and culture. I'm like, what does that actually mean? Does it even matter? I think looking at what has happened in Detroit with a total turnaround because of a new culture, players buying in, really strong leadership, I think it matters. And I think really all of the Browns' problems, almost since their inception, I would argue, comes back to them being the Browns. There's that phrase, Browns are going to brown. Browns are going to brown. Like, they genuinely are. They had clearly a good quarterback in Baker Mayfield. Look what he's doing in Tampa Bay. And they decided to kick him to the curb because they made him play with a bum shoulder. And then the owner stepped in and said that they wanted Deshaun Watson, and I think Kevin Stefanski is a good coach. I think they have good staff in Cleveland, but they are not allowed to do anything that the owner doesn't want them to do. I mean, look at the Shedeur Sanders drafting. I know I'll talk about the quarterbacks in a second, but it was said when he was drafted that Dion and Shedeur had built a special relationship with the Browns owner, Jimmy Haslam. Like it just, and you saw the draft room after they came out and said, no, it was our choice. But that draft room, like a hostage situation, like there was someone behind the counter with a gun pointed at everyone. So for me, the Browns, we can talk about the players and there's a lot of holes on the roster. Obviously they're not a strong roster, but they could have the Eagles. They can have the Eagles players at every position. They can have Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson to tackle. They can have Jalen. They can have the whole Eagles roster. They're not going to the playoffs with the culture they've built in Cleveland. The players aren't buying in. They've got a running back they drafted a running back who's also got legal problems. They just can't not keep being the same Browns. And I was at one point a Browns fan, which is why I know so much about the Browns. And as soon as they signed Deshaun Watson, I was gone. I'm not doing that. I'm not sat there every Sunday supporting a team that's championed a guy like that. Like, that's bonkers. So it's an incredibly frustrating topic for me, and one that I could talk about forever. But all I'm just going to say about this now is they're a mess. They're a mess.
I think it is a shame because, well, they had in the late teens they were terrible for a lot of it, and they had when Baker came in and that those 2 years before Stefanski came in, they had a lot of hope. Then he came in, they got to the playoffs. Baker had a great year. And then it's just it is just gone again, and it's I think I can separate them. I personally think Stefanski, he's basically done 2 NFL Coach of the Year jobs, getting those teams to the playoffs, getting that Joe Flacco team to the playoffs off the couch, and him winning Comeback Player of the Year, and then that team in 2020 again. Well, he won Coach of the Year for that job, and whereas for Berry, the GM. If you look at this roster, right? The star players of this roster, none of those players he drafted. You look at the star players of the roster, it's Myles Garrett was a previous regime, Denzel Ward previous regime. They're all previous regime, or they've been, all they've been added, and it's like the best player he's probably drafted is probably Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, and even him now with his injury, even again, and
he might not play again.
Exactly, Greg Newsom's injured. No, he's a decent player. He's not injured, but he's a decent player. But he's not obviously
he's not a star.
You could, exactly. And admittedly, their picks that they would have spent that could have made the process better were on Deshaun Watson. So I think personally, he should take the blame for that because this team, the star players of this team were there beforehand.
Yeah.
And
I mean, they could have had Travis Hunter traded down to get Mason Graham. I like Mason Graham. I think he's a good player. He's not Travis Hunter. And the Browns had the moment. They had the Baker Mayfield coming off the bench, beating the Jets on like Thursday Night Football. That was their like potential culture reset moment. And since then, they've done everything they can to not do it. And I think the Travis Hunter kind of trading out of that pick shows that they're just scared of the moment. They're given an olive branch to try and not be the same old Browns, and they go, no thanks.
the scenario is fascinating because the way the two are operating is as if they think their jobs are safe, whereas everyone else is looking at them and saying, I mean, obviously it's the Browns, and that's the most interesting thing. But I think the only way that at least Berry can save his job is obviously if they win, or the only other way is obviously before the draft. If they somehow got Cam Ward, then they could have potentially, if they had something to build, and they could have said, but that way. But that didn't happen because that Jameis Winston run last year has cost them. I feel like Jameis has done this to so many teams, but this team last year was terrible. Like 2 years ago, the Pair did really well to save their jobs when Joe Flacco had that magical run to the playoffs. Last year, their defense was okay, but it wasn't the same as the unit it was 2 years ago, where they were just beating up on teams. Their offense last year, 32nd in total offense, 32nd in points scored. And that's with that 5-week run of Jameis Winston after Watson got hurt that saw them put up 552 yards of offense and lose against the Broncos and Monday Night Football after Jameis threw a pick six. And also saw them beat the Ravens. Yeah, that was the full Jameis experience. And it was also that they also beat the Ravens and the Steelers of Jameis in that 5-week period as well. And that cost the team because they got the number 2 pick. What could have been and now they're in a scenario where they have 2 rookies. Joe Flacco's back, Kenny Pickett's there. They've just signed Snoop Huntley. Like this quarterback room is just nuts, isn't it?
It's again a mess. They got 6 quarterbacks on the roster: Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, Shadur Sanders, Tyler Huntley, Deshaun Watson. And what's crazy? The other irony is, none of those quarterbacks could even potentially be as good as the Browns would need them to be for them to even be an answer. It's not even like they have a really high variance, really raw, massive upside quarterback that could in like 2-3 years be the guy. They don't have a rookie Lamar Jackson. They don't have a Jordan Love, right? They don't have a project that's got a strong arm and all the physical tools that could
Spencer Rattler, for example. That
Spencer Rattler, even he would be the guy that I would choose. They've got Joe Flacco, old. Sure, he can get you to maybe 6, 7, 8 wins. Kenny Pickett, Super Bowl winner, but definitely not. Dylan Gabriel, he could operate the offense well. I think he could be like a point and shoot quarterback. I like Stefanski's offensive system, but he's not elevating that system, and the offense around him isn't really good enough. Shadur Sanders, despite what the propaganda will tell you, no, it's not Shadur Sanders either. Yes, he threw a touchdown in the preseason, and it's all fun to get excited about the preseason. I'm not hating on people that are like, I don't like the whole, it's just the preseason. But he's not the answer either, right? I think that personally. And then Tyler Huntley and Deshaun Watson. Just they need to close their eyes, go to bed, and wake up in 2026 and hope that things have just kind of sorted themselves out, basically, because it ain't happening this year.
No, luckily they're going to be bad this year, and they're also going to have another first-round pick because of the Mason Graham trade. So there is that. So there is hope, Browns fans, and again, it's pretty much it's an open secret that you're going to move on from Deshaun Watson as well. So at least that's over too. So then you have got that. But again, I personally, I mean, I'm higher on Shadur Sanders than some people, but again, I don't think he's the answer. I think he's just his ceiling's probably a 25 to 32 level quarterback starting in the NFL. I feel like that. Yeah, that's what he is. He's
high back is where you want him.
Yeah, he's accurate. He's a decent. He's a bridge quarterback. That's what he is.
Yes.
And the Browns don't need a bridge quarterback right now. And the whole thing about him starting preseason, obviously that was, most people thought that he was being set up to fail last week. He played decently, but again, that whole situation is fascinating because they don't want him there, right? The reason why he fell in the draft is because of the way his his attitude and the way him and his dad have treated the draft process and everything like that. And even on game day, he walks in with like a massive chain, and he has this big entourage of a speaker on game day when you're trying to prove to people that you're not like that, and then you do that, and then and again, he's wearing jewelry in the game and stuff like that, and it's just things like that. You look at that person is not what this organization need when they're on the hot seat, and the whole thing is just bizarre, isn't it? It's just bizarre.
I mean, he went up to a Browns beat reporter after a preseason game and was like, "Oh, why are you always writing bad things about me?" It's like, You are the quarter. Like, you can change that yourself. You don't need to go and confront a reporter for kind of doing their job. Like, there's gonna be reporters out there that are gonna say anything about you. That's the nature of being a sportsman in the public eye. Like, to go up after him rather than just be like, yeah, look, write about me now. It, like, confronted him. Like, it was like mafia boss waiting for a debt repayment. Like, just let your on field do the talking, not your off field.
Yeah, it will be Joe Flacco that starts. I think everyone knows that. Beyond him, no one knows what they're actually going to do, how many they keep on the roster or anything like that. We'll see what happens in the next couple weeks there. I mean, on this offense, on this team in a whole, strengths and weaknesses, I think the defense can keep them in games. It's definitely the unit you need. Obviously, you just paid Myles Garrett. I do like their secondary. I think I was sort of poo-pooing on Greg Newsome, but he's a decent player. They also know how to find defensive backs later on in the draft. They've got some good defensive backs there.
Denzel Ward's great.
Yeah, and again, you got people like even like the safeties and nickel guys and everything that they've done really well there. That's one area that they are good at. I'm really excited to see Mason Graham play. Carson Schwezinger as well. He's going to have a really big role as a rookie as well. I think our defense will be able to keep teams in games. The offense, God, it probably is the worst unit in the league. Maybe the Giants have got a worse offense and that's it. But this offensive line is not good. They've not been good the last 2 years since Bill Callahan left for the Titans. And when Jerry Jeudy or David Njoku are probably your best offensive players, then you've probably got a problem. They're decent players, but they're like third option guys for most teams. When those guys are your number ones, then that's the issue, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, I don't trust Jerry Jeudy as far as I can throw him, unfortunately. Yeah, sure, he had a great burst onto the scene for the Browns and had some massive games. I mean, it is fair to say that like a huge chunk of those yards came in a single game against Denver in that with the Jameis shootout. Before then, he's been a middling wide receiver, and the Broncos are very happy to get rid of him when they don't even really have very good receivers themselves, which I think says quite a lot, more so than his few big games with the Browns. It's just, there's so many questions about the offense, the quarterback. The offensive line was great in 2020. It's now old and on the decline. David Njoku is a good tight end. He can't do it by himself. I like Tillman and I like Jeudy as like wide receiver 2s and 3s. As 1 and 2, I kind of hate it. And, they had Nick Chubb. They had Baker Mayfield. They had a great offensive. Like, they had it. And you look at the team now and they do not have it.
Yeah, they did everything right. They went quarterback, they went corner. Obviously, the year before, they went Myles Garrett. They had Nick Chubb. And those 2017, 2018 drafts, they did everything right to build a team. And then they imploded it themselves. And I think it is... And now we're going to be in a scenario where you're going to have so many picks at the start of drafts for a couple of years now. And we're going all over again. And I think... Yeah, that's just I feel like I've seen this before because I have seen this before with Cleveland, and that's exactly what it is. Okay, let's finish the podcast by putting it in their win total. They're slated to play the 6th toughest schedule, so the hardest schedule in the division. Obviously, a lot of that is the fact that they've got to play the other 3 teams in division, and because of that, their line is at 5.5 wins. Which way are you thinking there?
I'm going the under for the Browns. I think I don't think they'll be like they're not going to be like the Browns in 2015 or when they didn't win a game or only won one game. I think that's actually very difficult to do in the modern NFL. But I think 4 is where I see the Browns. 4 or 5 wins is where I see the Browns, and I'll be stunned if they can get 6. To be honest with you, so I'm going to take the under.
Yeah, nowadays like number 1 pick territory is for 3, 4, 5 wins, whereas before it wasn't. It was 2, 3. So I feel like I agree with you. I felt that they're going. I'm gonna go the under. I feel like 4 or 5 wins is about right. A couple of those wins may be in division, but just the way it's been, it was the same last year. The AFC North is just crazy like that. Again, a couple of those wins may be defense led, but maybe one of the rookies comes in and has one off. Comes in when Flacco gets hurt and has one because no one's got any film on him. Has one crazy game that wins in the game or something like that. But yeah, I just it doesn't look great for Cleveland this year. But again, at least it can't get any worse than it is now. I think that's the positive thing for you Cleveland fans. Okay, that is a wrap for today's episode. Thanks for tuning in as we broke down the AFC North. And as always, we'd love to hear how wrong you think we have been. So don't forget to let us know in the comments. You can hit us up on Twitter at Full10Yards or drop your thoughts in the comments below. As I said, big thanks to you, Dom, for joining me today. Where can people go to check out more of your work?
At Dom Corb's NFL on TikTok, doing some breakdowns in the preseason, and then I have my own YouTube at Corb's NFL. So go subscribe and check it out. But thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Not a worry at all. It's been great to have you on again. Big fan of your content. I think it's very good. If you enjoyed the show, a quick rating or review on podcast platforms would be great. It really helps us keep things growing and hitting algorithms. And for those watching on YouTube, don't forget to give the video a like. And if you want to catch the next episode as soon as it drops, hit the notification bell next to the subscribe button as well. I'll be back next week with another guest for our 4th division preview of the 2025 NFL season. Until then, have an amazing rest of your day, and we'll see you next time.